Hello and welcome to the Night Owl Philanthropy podcast, What's Your Why? I'm your host, Dean Jones, and each week I sit down with charity leaders to explore the experiences, values and choices behind their work and what good leadership looks like in practice. In this episode, I'm joined by Ian Nutt, Director of Fundraising and Engagement at the Heart of England Forest and Trustee at Oxford People's Theatre. Ian brings together two worlds that feel increasingly important in our sector: our deep need for nature and the power of stories to help us make sense of ourselves and the world around us. At Heart of England Forest, he is helping to grow and protect one of the country's newest native woodlands for generations to come. And through Oxford People's Theatre, he's supporting community-led performance that gives people a voice and a place to belong. Ian, thank you so much for joining me. It's great to have you here. Let's start, as we always do on this podcast, with that key question. What's your why? What is it about nature and the arts that's kept you so focused in those areas for such a long time?
Yeah, think both of those for me have always been intrinsic. They're things that have just been in me. Somebody, I think, probably once said to me about pursuing something that makes you happy. In fact, I think the exact phrase was, do something that brings you joy. And both of those things have always brought me a lot of joy, a lot of pleasure. And I have always really proactively pursued that. Even since I was a kid, I kind of knew that I needed to do that as my job. My job was never about earning money. It was never about fulfilling anything other than to pursue the thing that I loved, I think.
Great. Thank you for that answer. When people ask what you do, how do you usually introduce your work, either at Heart of England Forest and obviously with Oxford People's Theatre? Hmm.
I always really proudly tell people that I work for a charity, even though that doesn't always get a great response. Some people think, oh, that's the most amazing thing. You must be so proud. And then you get the responses of, yeah, worthy thing to do. But I always start by telling people I work for a charity, because I am proud that I work for a charity and have always worked for charities. And at Heart of England Forest, I remember talking about it. It was one of the things, classic things that you're asked in your interview was like, give us your pitch as to why here and nowhere else. And I remember just saying, well, we're planting 12 million trees. Like, what's not amazing about that? You can figure the rest of it out for yourself. So I kind of really proud about that. And Oxford People's Theatre, I got involved there because friends were doing performances and acting there. But it's the ethos of Oxford People's Theatre that's so phenomenally powerful. They break down barriers for people being able to perform, be involved in any way, shape or form from any background in theatre in the community. And that's just when you go and see the stuff that OPT performs, it's just, you suddenly understand why it's such a great thing to do.
Great, thank you. So I'm just going to go back a little bit. When you look back on your early days, when you were a child, a younger person, what part did nature and the arts play in your life, do you think?
So the nature thing's a funny one. So my family, we lived in a semi in a cul-de-sac in a little village. My parents moved there from Greater London in the 70s, and there was a patch of land at the back that needed clearing. My dad bought some goats, cleared the land, and the land became theirs. And it was literally like a real version of the good life. And we ate what we grew. We produced the food ourselves. We ate it, but partly out of necessity because there was no money. So I kind of just grew up from a really, really young age, surrounded by animals, surrounded by nature. And it was just second nature to me. That was just what you did. It was really normal. And, we grew up in the 80s where you opened the back door and you went outside and you didn't come back in till tea time. So I just spent all my days outside with animals. So it's just going back to that bit of it was always me. It was always built into who I am. And then again, growing up in a village with theatre and the arts, there's not a lot to do in a village, especially not in the 80s. So you get involved with whatever was going on. And in our village, I was a bit obsessive. I got involved with everything. I was a bell ringer. I sang in the choir. I did scouts. I did whatever was going on. And I did theatre and I got involved in it and really found who I was through theatre as well.
And was there a particular moment when within those two different areas that you thought actually these things really matter, not just to you, but they actually matter more generally?
Yeah, I think with nature, I think I'd always known, I always knew it mattered. even, from a very, very young age. And there's something, especially around animals, where there's a sense of responsibility that you as a human have a responsibility to care for it, to look after it, to treat it in the right way. And I think my parents in particular really brought me up to feel and understand and believe that. So that becomes very apparent, especially with animals, whether, even if it's just someone with a pet, that it's your responsibility and you've got to look after it. So I think that was always just built into me, and that made great sense. Theatre took me a lot longer to realize that. So theatre, I did it because I was a show off, probably to start with. And I did it, knowingly for that reason. And because I loved doing it, and it was slightly selfish. And I still do describe it as slightly selfish, the theatre side of things.
It's interesting.
But I remember that very clearly at university, and I was doing theatre. I did a science degree, but was doing theatre in the margins. I remember talking to a friend and saying that I shouldn't be doing theatre because it was a really selfish thing to do. And this friend berated me so much and said, that's a really rubbish thing to say, and don't devalue the arts and theatre because you don't understand how much, if you make an audience of 500 people belly laugh on a Friday night, then you are gifting something to somebody, and don't devalue it. It kind of stuck with me. I've never forgotten that. I thought, oh yeah, it's not just about me when it comes to theatre. And then that's grown and grown. And the more theatre I've done and the more I've, got involved in that world and the power of what you can actually do with theatre, that's where that understanding has grown over time.
Great. Thank you for that. Obviously, you've just mentioned you've worked across sort of fundraising and engagement and environment and the arts. What first drew you into sort of the charitable world? So you've obviously got those two areas that you're really interested in, and then they kind of merged over a period of time into this kind of charity theme.
Yeah, there's a really funny thing with working for a charity. So again, going back to like when I was a kid, I always knew I wanted to work for a charity. I've still got in a box to the side of me here, because I keep it as a little memento. When I was 10, I think it was, I typed on my mum's typewriter a list of the 100 charities I wanted to work for.
Oh, wow.
And I've still got it, which is really random. Classic. I'll take any one of the 100, but I just typed up this list kind of thinking, and so I knew, and I don't really know why I knew that so early on, but I did. It sounds terribly worthy, which I hate, but that's just who I am. That's how I've always been. And I always knew I didn't want to work for a company. I didn't want to work for money. I didn't want to profit. I just wanted to do something good. And I think I've stuck with that and always thought I need to be able to get up every morning, go to bed every night, and be able to look myself in the eye and say, yes, I did the right thing. I did something decent. And that's what's always driven me. But I didn't go straight into charity work. I started doing, a straight out, did the really random jobs, and then ended up setting up my own company before that financially collapsed. And then that was my foot into the charity sector, and I've never left.
And obviously you sort of very briefly touched on the fact that kind of financial collapse of the business, but I'm assuming that something positive came from that. I think every time I've spoken to somebody that's gone through a challenge like that, they've turned that lesson into something that they can then benefit from in the future in one way or another. Have you been able to identify what benefits you got from that, adversity?
A lot. So my company only lasted for just short of 5 years. It collapsed with the financial crisis in 2000. Yeah, it's all right, isn't it? 5 years. And it was really big, but we did the classic boom bust. So within 2 years, we were really quite a big deal. And we were in the national press and national media pretty much every week. I was ghostwriting in The Guardian for a very famous chef. There was all sorts of amazing stuff was going on, and that was within 2 years. And then financial crisis in 2007, and we were gone 2 years later. But there was so much that I learned from that. And I think running, so it was me and a friend, and we set it up together. And running your own company where you have to learn how to do everything, and it's 365 days a year, and everything goes into, my parents put money and time and effort in, so you just learn resilience and all of that sort of thing. And with the collapse, there was definitely an element of figuring out how to, so I was bankrupt as well, so I had nothing left and was on benefits for about 8 months. So I definitely learned about resilience and how to, and I took the time
Mm,
to really rethink what I wanted to do. And
mm,
I was a van driver for a period, delivering ready meals to vulnerable people. And
right.
I just saw that as a chance to kind of back out and take
Mm,
note and take stock and learn from what was
mhm.
around me, I think.
Who or what have been the biggest influences on how you lead and build support for your charities or causes that you work for?
I was pretty lucky that my first role in the charity sector was with a really quite a big charity, the Soil Association, so a UK-wide charity that was blessed with some amazing, brilliant people. My first line manager there was a lady called Libby Grundy, who had been
Okay.
a chief exec in various other charities. And I still have a number of her sayings and phrases in my mind that I still draw on now, and bits where I still didn't quite know what people were telling me at the time, but I knew were important, stacked them away, and probably I didn't understand for another 5, 6 years quite what they meant. Never
Mm,
forget somebody once telling me that I wasn't strategic enough.
okay.
I didn't know what that meant. I was like, of course I am. Of course I'm strategic. What do you mean? And it probably took me about 6 years to go, oh yeah, no, I definitely wasn't. And now I understand what being
Right.
strategic means and how to do it. So I was just blessed to be around some of those really influential people. And the Soil
Good.
Association operated, at number 10 level. So working with Lord Melchett, who again, he was a big policy advisor under Tony Blair and Harold Macmillan, and he
Right.
just was just so powerfully influential. And
Mhm.
some of it was the simplest stuff. So you take
Mm,
stock from those around you. And I think that's still the case. There's never any point in leadership where you categorically know.
mm.
Everyone else knows bits more than you do, and you just constantly draw on that, I think.
It's really good that you've got that sort of level of humility to recognize that and continue to sort of learn and grow in that way. That's
Yeah,
something I think is very useful for anybody that's looking at going into leadership to hold on to that. It's such a
yeah,
valuable
definitely.
thing. For listeners who don't know it, can you describe Heart of England Forest in a sentence? Actually, I don't think I'll ask you to describe it in a sentence or two. Let's just describe what Heart of England Forest is.
So, Heart of
Mm,
England is a relatively new charity, and we have the mission of planting the newest, largest broadleaf native forests in England. So that equates to 12 million trees, over 30,000 acres. And to give you another little number behind it, we think that's going to take us at least another 30 years just
right.
to buy the land and plant it. So that's essentially what we're doing. But we then have that whole interface with it provides for nature, wildlife, obviously carbon, climate, and then people as well. So there's a large people interface. So I have a very strong belief, which maps in with Heart of England, which is that there's no point protecting nature and wildlife if you don't bring people along with it, because they won't value
Mm.
it if we don't do that.
That leads really nicely into the next question, which is what is it about trees and woodlands that seem to speak to people so deeply, even if they're not especially outdoorsy people? But there's something about that, isn't there? And obviously, in order for you to achieve all the things that you want to achieve, as you've just recently alluded to, you need those people to come along with you on the journey. But what is it, do you think, about that attracts people and draws people in?
It's really funny because trees are around us everywhere. So even if you're in, the depths of the busiest, most built up city, there will still be trees there, even if you might not realize it.
Mm,
So they're familiar to people. Um, and there is a difference. There is definitely a fundamental difference about people connecting with a tree, and a forest, because a forest is not necessarily a comfortable place for everybody. And we have to really, really double down on how we engage people very differently in the
mm,
forests as opposed to trees. But
mm,
trees are familiar, everyone knows and understands what a tree is. And I think
mm,
there's been a lot of that communication and outreach piece of describing what's happening around carbon and what's happening around climate change. So people kind of know, it's in their psyche now, that trees are a good thing and that we shouldn't be cutting them down and
mm,
all that kind of stuff. So kind of part of that job is done for us. But quite often I've seen that working in the natural environment sector, when you work with people who aren't familiar with those bigger, wider green spaces and forests, it's not until you actively can take them in and show them and get them to spend time there in a way that's comfortable for them, that people really start to understand the wider benefits of physically being there. So there's still a massive disparity actually in people really valuing and understanding green space and trees, I think.
And this is probably quite a challenging question to answer. It's probably on your mind as we speak in terms of what you're doing. But from a fundraising perspective, how do you pitch something as long term as planting and protecting a forest? Because even from your perspective, if you were saying it's going to take 30 years to develop and build what you're hoping to achieve, and by that time both of us are going to be fairly old, and so we're going to naturally be passing that baton on to the next generation to continue that work. But how do you inspire and get people engaged in that?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. I mean, encouraging anyone to part with their hard-earned cash for anything charitable is a really big challenge. It's a really, really big thing. The benefits we have, though, so the immediate benefit is you can literally see it. You can literally see a tree being planted. And if you go, what's fascinating about Heart of England Forest is where we are, because we are still buying the land and planting the trees. So the forest is in a large proportion of it isn't even there yet. So when you go there, you don't expect to go and see this enormous established forest, because you won't. But you will see a lot of open space with the tree guards and saplings planted in it. So you can literally see, and that metric of whatever it is, something like £6 for a tree, you can physically literally see where your £6 is going, or whatever that might be. So you've kind of got a really nice tangible bit. And then you can show the really appealing stuff of, and here's the green hair streak butterfly, and here's the barn owls that are nesting in the trees. So we've got some really, really tangible stuff. The longevity piece is a much harder description and a much harder sell, but I'm convinced, as someone who then thinks about, so what's our legacy, what's our purpose, what's our point here? So for those of us who are lucky enough to have enough cash to be able to part with longer term, to think so if we're talking about the higher net worth side of things, your 10 grand, your 50 grand, now we can promise you, we can prove to you, we can show you that in 130 years time, it will still be there physically delivering benefits to people way beyond you. That's proper legacy. That's real, tangible legacy. And we're kind of guaranteeing that, because we're planting a forest that is owned by us in our land. And that's quite a rarity in the charity sector, to be able to kind of guarantee the longevity of a legacy, because otherwise we know sometimes in the charity sector that legacies can be used within a financial year against delivering the core charitable objectives. Now, that's not an issue. That's not a problem. That's not a bad thing. But there's something different for us, selfishly, at Heart of England Forest. That means that we can physically show people what their legacies will do.
And so from a fundraising perspective, you mentioned it's £6 per tree. How much further have you got to go, and what have you got to achieve?
Good question. So it's quite so unfortunately, it's quite complicated. We don't directly necessarily always fundraise for the trees, because there are government grants out there that pay for the saplings. It's a real mix. And you imagine when you're planting 12 million, there's a whole mixture across the piece about how it's funded and where it all comes from. So so it's not as clear cut as that, unfortunately, with the tree planting. But there's a real mix for us about how we raise the funds, because a tree is one thing, but then all of the biodiversity work that we do, recording nature and creating the ponds and the scrapes that are within the forests and the grassland mixes, because it's not just trees, there's a whole rich habitat mix that we've got going on. That's the stuff that we then really focus our fundraising efforts around, as well as to get people to understand the broader aspects of everything that we're doing.
Great, thank you. And quite often when we're in the charity sector and we're doing the work we're doing as fundraisers or trying to engage people, we talk about the challenges, or sometimes we talk about the opportunities and the impact that our work can make, or the difference that supporters can make in supporting those charities. What do you see this as? Something overcoming a challenge, creating an opportunity, and is there an urgency around it that you tell potential supporters to get that support, quickly and to enable you to do all the things you want to do? There's lots of questions in there.
Yeah, and I think it differs depending on the organisation. So I've been in a really interesting set of charities. So this is my fourth one I think I've worked for now. And there's a real difference between those charities, where you're, depending on what your articles are and what your purpose is as a charity. So if you are, so at the Soil Association, we were quite campaigny, quite loud in that space, and rightly so. Oxfordshire Mind was different because it was a federated structure. So the local minds were federated into a national structure. The campaigning, the local didn't. So we were a lot quieter, a lot less political. So the point being, you can dial up the urgency versus the movement building versus the support, depending on what charity you're working for and what their purpose is. So if you are in a political campaigning kind of charity, then of course you can really do your campaigning really big and loud, and you can push. And, you could, we could say climate emergency and dial up that language. And it's right. And it's true. You're never lying, but we might not choose to do that at Heart of England, where we are not a campaigning, lobbying organisation in the same way. And our ways of connecting people are through heart, soul, mind, longer term than campaigning and policy. And not because we don't believe in it and don't think it's urgent and important, but our way of communicating that is different. So it's kind of a mix depending on the charity's objectives, I think.
Okay, great. Thank you. And how's the conversation around climate and nature shifted in recent years from, your, personal experience in terms of what you're doing now? And what's that done for your work? How's it impacted on your work? Because there are lots of things happening in the world at the moment, both politically and otherwise, that actually impact on how people feel about their surroundings and nature and the urgency and the need that sits around that.
That's a really interesting question. And you've just prompted a memory. So when we set up the Ethical Food Company, which we did in 2004, I think, something like that. I was, and it was like I said, it was a big deal at the time. We were on national media quite a lot. We were being picked up on a lot, so doing a lot of national TV and radio, because people didn't quite understand what ethical meant as a term, and everyone was talking about organic. I remember writing a blog for Janie Lee Grace about, was organic the fail-safe term for everything, everything future-facing in food and farming. I remember talking very much about the word sustainability was going to be the new big word. And that was only in 2004, and people didn't know what I meant when I was talking about sustainability, and that was going to be a really big thing. So at the Ethical Food Company, we were one of the really early retailers who was talking about sustainability, but also about carbon. And no one other than a really tiny, tiny part of the world knew what on earth we were talking about. And in those days, carbon was, oh yeah, if I pay you an extra £1, you'll offset the carbon emissions of driving your van to deliver my food to me. And that was about as much as anyone understood about carbon, and carbon was not being talked about. It was not there. So that narrative, by the time, and so many people have said to me about the Ethical Food Company who knew what we were doing. They're like, oh, don't you want to set it up again now, 20 years later, because now everyone gets it. And it's so true. In 2004, it was just way too early. People didn't really know what we were talking about around sustainability and carbon. Whereas now we're in a very, very different world. And I think there's something about COVID as well, dare I say, that has dialed up people's understanding of urgency and what can happen if we don't tackle things and do things properly. I think that's really changed the psyche of how people think about the urgency of things.
And preparedness, I think, isn't it? It's about being prepared.
Yeah, it is. And I remember during so I was in a new role. I started a role at the Earth Trust in the third week of the first lockdown.
Okay,
Which was a really curious time. And that was really tricky because, of course, everything, rightly so, was to do with COVID. And I was trying to lead an organization's future strategy around how important the carbon climate crisis was. And I remember having the conversation of, will anyone remember about climate change when this is all over? And I remember talking really clearly about, because the climate crisis has been going on for so long, and people will remember it again, and nature and biodiversity loss, they will remember again that actually it is absolutely critical, and it will come back full circle. So I think it's a bit like, there's a phrase that I can't bring to mind now, it all comes full circle anyway. People will remember, and the climate carbon crisis is not going away and will continue to come back.
Great. I'm going to shift back now to a conversation around Oxford People's Theatre,
Yeah.
if that's okay. To ask what drew you to become a trustee there, and obviously a trustee role is different to a fundraising and engagement role. To some extent, it's great to have the on the ground experience, I think, as a fundraiser to then become a trustee, because I think you are a much more valuable resource to the charity. But tell me about that.
Yeah, really interesting process as to how I signed up for this one. So I've been asked to be a trustee, I don't know, for quite a few charities, and I've always just had to say no because it's so hard to balance it
Mm,
against full-time work as well. Um, And for me, I kind of always suspected I would end up being a trustee of a charity, but it
mm,
always had to be one where my gut and my heart belonged. So I
mhm,
kind of wasn't going to say yes to various charities. It had to be
mm,
the right one at the right time. Now,
mhm,
Oxford People's Theatre, I went to see, they were doing so it was before they became a charity. They were a kick, I think, originally. And they
mhm,
did a big crowdfunder launch evening. And I had a particularly tough, I nearly swore, day and was really not in a good place. And you know, when you do that thing where you're going, oh, I've got to go to this evening function thing that I've been invited to. I really don't want to go. I
mhm,
can't be happy, chatty person. And
mhm,
I went, and it was comedy. It was a comedy cabaret night. And I laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. And I cried at the end of the evening because I suddenly realized that it was just, I didn't know that that's what I needed, but I needed it
mhm,
so badly.
mhm,
And it fundamentally saved me that day.
mm.
And that was kind of it. That was the point where I went, I have to be involved in this organization. I have to do something else. So I stayed in conversation with the two amazing directors, Lizzie and Emma, who run it. And they'd been like teeing me up for quite a while to be a
Mm,
trustee. So when they asked, I was like, okay, I have to do this.
mm,
And it's one of those things I didn't think I'd have time. And I think I'm a pretty rubbish trustee most of the time because I really struggle to find the time,
mm.
but I do everything that I can to support it.
That's great. What do you think it is about community theatre that other community activities sometimes can't reach?
It depends on the people that run it as well. Oxford People's Theatre is very, very much about how it is run. So
Mhm,
it is also run with a committee of community. Um, I can't now remember the name that we call them. Basically, community activists
mm,
um, who engage, who are specifically tasked to go and engage people and talk to people and make everybody feel welcome home with us as an organisation. So that way, you have to fundamentally shift if you are truly going to engage community in an inclusive fashion. You
mhm,
can't do that with me walking into a room saying, come and join in. You have to
mm,
fundamentally know your communities and you have to fundamentally be within those communities and let them lead it and engage
mhm,
in it. And doing that through theatre in a completely non-judgmental, completely open, completely welcoming space
mm,
means that people can enter at the place that they are ready to enter and
mhm,
engage.
mhm,
So it doesn't always work in community theatre, but it does with OPT because no one is judged, no one is tested, no one is auditioned, no one is
mm,
queried in any way, shape or form. You come into that room and you engage in the way that you want to engage. And that then unlocks a community in a very, very different way.
mm. I want to go and see something now. It sounds really interesting. Have you seen a production from the company or a project that really showed you theatre's power to change lives? I'm assuming from what you've just said that would be true, and there are examples of that.
Yeah, there really are. Other than the one that I mentioned just selfishly for myself, where I just didn't even know I needed
Yeah.
it, and then walked out myself with just basically something I will never forget.
Mm,
But there was another production of OPTs I saw, and it was a community pantomime. And
mhm.
I don't normally go and see pantomimes. I grew up doing them and kind of didn't really want to go and see one myself. But this was just a totally different ball game. And I can remember very, very clearly that one of the cast members I think she was nearly 90, and she came on with her phone, which had her lines on so that she could remember it,
Hmm.
and delivered a phenomenal performance, completely understated, completely under the radar. But
Hmm.
what was so powerful about it was the moment that she walked on with her mobile phone,
Hmm.
kind of immediately, as an audience member, you kind of went, she's 90. This doesn't matter.
Hmm.
Her performance was incredible. And just that
Hmm.
acceptance of that's who she is. This is the performance that she is giving alongside a load of kids. So I think the youngest kid was 9. So there was like a 80-year age gap in that performance. It changed how the audience watched that performance. It changed
Hmm.
how everyone reacted. It was no longer the pantomime that we all think we're going to see. It's just incredibly powerful. And it's changing, I think, the perception of what theatre is and what performance can be.
Sounds really exciting. Thanks for that. Do you see threads that connect your work in the forest and your theatre trusteeship, even if they sort of seem quite distant? Are there things that bring them together in any way?
Interestingly, one of the other curiosities, I think I'm allowed to call it, probably with Heart of England Forest, is we were established by a philanthropist who was also hugely dedicated to the arts,
Oh, right.
fascinated by the arts, and very, very influential in the arts sector and publishing.
Mm,
So part of what we also have and sits in my remit, under my
mm,
engagement remit, is our heritage. So we have a rather large art, sculpture, and artifact collection
mm,
that we are still figuring out quite exactly what to do with all of it. But some of it is physically placed within the forest. So we have
mhm.
sculptures within the forest as well. And there
Right.
is definitely a strong connection between the arts and green space and the outdoors.
Mm,
I also have outdoor education visits sit within my remit. So where
mm,
young people come, school groups come and visit and connect. And quite often the method with which we connect people is through the arts,
mm,
whilst outdoors. Being outdoors, connecting and talking, I was talking earlier about what are the routes for people coming in to connect,
mm,
can be so, so, so varied. And actually,
mm,
if you connect with people in a big, scary forest that they've never been in before through art,
mm,
through creating art or painting something or
mm,
just performance, whatever it might be, can be a really, really welcoming tool for people to
mm,
engage in a very, very
mm,
different way. So
mm,
those threads definitely are there. We
mm,
shouldn't ever think of green space, forest, nature as being for that purpose only. There is so many
mm.
different ways for people to engage in it.
Yeah, I think that leads really nicely onto this next question, which is about, if you look at woods or forests and stages in theatres, they're both environments that make you feel like you belong in one way or another.
Yeah.
Um, and and I think that would be true from what you've just said about the way you can incorporate art in what you're trying to achieve in the forest. That's really interesting.
Mm.
It wasn't a question; ended up being more of a statement. But there we go. You talked about your role as trustee being something that you decided to do thoughtfully. You didn't sort of just leap at the chance because you recognise you're a busy person, and taking on the role as trustee is a big commitment. And if you
Mm.
want to do it properly, um, you need to be able to sort of devote sort of a considerable amount of time.
Yeah.
How do you find the balance of that? With the other commitments that you've got. And this is talking about, I guess, things like about setting your own boundaries around what you can and can't
Yeah.
do. But yeah, what do you do to kind of get the balance right?
I'm not going to lie, it's really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. So I am, 8 months, 9 months into being a trustee.
Mhm.
And I actually sent a message to the lovely directors and our chair, Georgia, the other day saying, I'm going to stop um, beginning all of my messages to you with an apology, which is all I do the whole time. Like, sorry, I haven't done this. Sorry, I haven't done this. Sorry, I haven't done this. But it is really difficult. It's really hard, especially because as a charity, Oxford People's Theatre is so new. We're less than a year old, so we're still in that finding our feet, and the trustees are having to do everything. We've got no employed staff, so everything is voluntary at the moment. So it's an incredibly challenging thing. But what I am finding, and because all of us are volunteers, so the other trustees are volunteers and the 2 directors are volunteers at the moment as well, is the patience amongst all of us to find ways that work. So I tend to do my trustee work either in the evenings, so around 7 o'clock-ish is when we have meetings. I think I've got one this Monday coming at around 7 o'clock. But being really, really focused. I mean, it really forces you to focus on the things that you have to get done. And the main work that I do with them is obviously around fundraising, income generation, also governance. So all of that, what does it mean to govern properly in a charity, and how are we legally compliant and compliant with fundraising regulator? But the other bit I do is I kind of wake up really early in the mornings. So quite often, and this has always been my case, is the stuff that I don't quite manage to fit in, I do really, really early on a Saturday morning. So I'll spend a couple of hours, 3 hours before everyone else is awake on a Saturday morning and cracking through that work. But I'm not going to lie, it's just additional work, and I just have to find ways to do it. But I do compartmentalize. I try really hard not to let it cross over with my employed work, because for me personally, I need to separate that out. I need to divide quite carefully. It works differently for different people, but that's what it needs to be for me.
Obviously, the first question I asked you is about your. Do you think that your why has changed over the years, and in what way do you think it's changed?
Yeah. It certainly has. The original why is still definitely there. That's still at the core and the center of it all. But there have been whys for me, and I think this is more to do with the career bit, if you like, so some of my moves that I've made have been career based. And some of them not the good ones. I was essentially a chief exec of the Rare Breed Survival Trust, a UK-wide charity, when I was 30, and it was just too early. It was just too soon. I mean, lovely that they believed and trusted in me, but I chose to leave because it was just too much, and I needed to shift. And I recognised that, which was, I think, really important at the time. And then the Soil Association again. So I'd worked there for 11 years and I loved it, and I had no reason to leave other than I wanted to change. I wanted to move into a broader spectrum that wasn't just dealing with food, which is what I was dealing with at the time. I wanted to go back to some of my animal farming roots. And then moved into that other job, and then was a director at the Earth Trust, because that role included being responsible for a 1,300-acre farm. So I kind of, it was taking some of that decision to force some of the more career progression, selfish bits of the why. But I think that's important, because if you're not truly passionate and driven and doing the things for you as well, then that whole heart and soul bit of the why is at risk of drifting or just getting a bit lost, I think. So, and the move to the heart of England forest for me, I have just been describing it to everyone as the dream job. It does, my portfolio is really, really broad here, but it literally draws on a bit of everything that I've done up to this point. So that was also a selfish move. I didn't really want to leave Mind. I was very happy there. But this job at Heart of England literally just had my name written in the job title. So it was kind of really silly not to. So there was that why shifted, if you like, in that sense. Yeah.
Such a great answer. Thank you very much for that. Obviously, I think you brought yourself into the answer a lot there, and that's because by the nature it is about you, that the why is about you, really. What do you wish more people understood about the emotional and personal benefits of both nature and creativity, that perhaps some people might not be aware of them? It may not have touched them yet or ever, but what do you think it brings you on a personal level?
The theatre creativity side of things for me, there's a really, really special thing about a sense of belonging and community in whatever way you get involved. So mainly as a hobby, I act as well. And it is mainly acting. I'm not normally behind the scenes. And that is slightly the selfish bit, because for me, that's my escapism. And I like to have no responsibility. So as an actor, you have very little responsibility other than remembering the lines and stand in the right place, But that's partly that selfish bit. But the sense of community and belonging and family is so important. And for me, selfishly, I get a huge amount of that because I get to depend on other people, rather than in my professional role where a lot of people are depending on me. So I get to let go of that and be a far smaller cog in a greater thing in theatre. In nature and wildlife, there are I personally get huge benefits from it. If I need a glimpse in the middle of the day, if there are points of the day, so working from home like I have been today, if I need to take stock and get a moment, I will go and stand and look in the garden and just watch the birds just for 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And it allows me to detach, switch off,
Mm.
and study and just look. And I know I'm very lucky that, I studied animal behavior, I studied zoology, so I literally know what I'm looking at.
Mm.
But you don't have to. You can just stand and breathe. You can just stand and take a moment and look at the trees, look at whatever it is that's around you. And I would love for more people to find that space and that ability, because the benefits are huge. I know that green social prescribing tries to do that, but I just don't think there's anywhere near enough of it. And I'm not going to get political, but the investment in stuff like green social prescribing is a tiny drop in the ocean of what could and should be happening around social prescribing all round, where rather than prescribing drugs to solve everything, the social prescribing stuff is so massively undertapped still.
Well, hopefully in the future, with the work you're doing at the forest, that opens that opportunity up even more for
Yeah,
that sort of
that's the hope.
intervention. In fundraising terms, where do you see the biggest opportunities or challenges for environmental charities such as yours?
There's a really interesting one. So that it relates partly back to how has the world changed around understanding and learning about climate, environment, nature. It's not going away, and those crises are not going away. We know that global temperatures are still rising. That's not going away. They're still going in completely the opposite direction. And this, without sounding too doom and gloom, Professor Sir Michael Marmot, who is kind of seen as being like the Don around public health and inequalities. His report, which looked at the state of inequalities in England, gosh, it must be now nearly 15 years ago, he launched that report. 10 years in, I was very lucky to be involved in the 10-year report. He reported that the inequalities had got wider, not smaller, despite everyone saying, yeah, we fundamentally need to change something. The context of all of that means the need is not going away. The need is actually getting greater. Subsequent governments will continue to need to fund it. And part of that funding mix is there. So part of that narrative is still going to be there. So in the environmental sector, we're still going to have a lot to hang our hat on to basically kind of go, yeah, this isn't just us in the charity sector saying, woe is us, poor butterflies, poor bees. It's real and the evidence is there. And with climate change in particular, see it. We're seeing the flash floods, we're seeing the forest fires, we're seeing desertification. We know what's happening. So at the risk of sounding, this is far more lobbying campaigning, isn't it? But we will be able to continue to make those points and to drive public awareness around that and drive that funding ask towards it. But alongside that, alongside the doom gloom politics campaigning piece, there is also a real soft appeal point for people to engage around. So one of the ones that's really obvious for us, we've got the biodiversity, you've got your bees, your pollinators, your owls, your dormice, all of those sorts of lovely, iconic species that we can say to people, look, your money is helping protect these species. But also then the children's experiences and inequality of experiences of people experiencing and connecting with nature. So we still have a lot of really, really lovely quality content that helps people understand that by supporting us, you're enabling these children to experience nature for the first time.
Thank you. Thanks very much
Sorry,
for that.
that was quite a big political answer, but
No, that was a really great answer. Thank you. Obviously, you've worked across a number of different sectors now. Some of them, there are some similarities, but obviously there's others that are very different. What surprises you most about how people engage with charity generally?
what surprises me most about it?
Mm. Mm.
There's still a real dichotomy of how
Okay.
people engage with the charity sector. I think I can't remember what the question was we talked about earlier about probably about me explaining why I do what I do and saying I work for a charity, and you'll get two answers. Those people who go, "Oh, that's really lovely, well done you,"
Mm.
camp one, and then camp two of like, "That's incredible,
Mm.
what an amazing thing to do. The supporting charities comes in that way as well. And I hate to say it, because as fundraisers, we should never turn away a single penny. And of course we don't. But the thing that really rubs me up the wrong way are the
Mm.
coppers dropped in a pot
Okay.
and people feeling like they've done their charitable contribution. Now,
Mm.
charitable contributions don't have to be money. It can be
Mm.
voting, can be clicking, it can be a change.org campaign, it can
Mm.
be following on social media, it can be commenting on stuff. It doesn't have to involve money. It
Mm.
can be putting your votes where your mouth
Mm.
is. It can be
Mm.
walking, it can be marching, it can be volunteering, it can be turning up to stuff. I'm not
Mm.
saying it has to be money, although of
Mm.
course that always helps. But it's
Mm.
about fundamentally choosing the things you care about and do something about it. And
Mm.
that for me is that where we don't have that, that's not that great in the UK. There are other
Yeah, yeah.
nations far, 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 far better at us than us at doing
So
that.
too much value is put on the money side and not on the actual way you're putting the money in there, and what more are you going to do
Yeah,
about it? How are you going to change this issue, this challenge?
exactly that. And when I arrived at Oxfordshire Mind, I used to talk quite a lot about, because like all charities in fundraising, money, 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 numbers, 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 and you're being driven by numbers, and it's painful in fundraising. It is pain,
Mm.
or it can be exhausting,
Mm.
it can be soul destroying, because you are
Mm.
constantly chasing numbers. And I
Mm.
remember and I'm not saying that's what it was like at Oxfordshire Mind, but there was very much a focus on the numbers and the money,
Mm.
and
Mhm.
like there are in most charities. And I remember to the
Mhm.
team kind of going, forget the money,
Mm.
concentrate on what we're saying, what we're doing,
Mm.
connecting, telling those stories. The money will come, the money will follow, but don't ask for the money. And
Focus on
that,
the why.
yeah, exactly that, because it's so, that is fine. The money will come, the money will flow. If you're saying the
Mm.
right things, connecting in the right way, doing
Mm.
the right stuff, showing the impact, the money will come. You just need to put the
Mm.
processes in place for the money.
Mm.
And I know that's really boiling it down to simplicities,
It's great.
but
It's and I think when we're talking about what you've just spoken about, it's not so much fundraising, it's the word philanthropy. I think philanthropy is about
mm,
that act of giving time, giving whatever it is that you can to make something, whatever the cause is,
yeah,
to overcome it. So,
yeah.
so what role do you think philanthropy plays alongside government when it comes to nature and culture in terms of making that change? Is is it just down to government to make some of these significant changes, or where does philanthropy really come into its own?
No, certainly has to lay the groundwork, subsequent government. So I'm not talking about any one
Mm.
single government. And of course, this is
Mm.
part of the issue, is you need that cross-party
Mhm.
buy-in for stuff, especially around climate, nature, biodiversity.
Mm.
So they have to put the groundwork in place.
Mm.
But then relating to philanthropy is, and I think this is why, sorry, going back to the groundwork of government putting
Mm.
things in place, if people can see that the government are committing properly and doing stuff
Mm.
properly and investing in it properly, then that enables the philanthropic side of things to say, we will now get behind it and do our bit as well. I
Mm.
think there is a risk that if we don't see that ground investment, and again, I don't necessarily just mean money, but policy change or whatever it might
Mm.
be, that commits to it, then people are less willing to
Mm.
step in and do all the stuff that we possibly see governments should be doing. But
Mm.
that needs to be in place for the philanthropy to truly kick in
Mm.
and take place. And then the philanthropy should then be doing the really exciting, innovative, game change stuff on top
Mm.
of all of what is the
Mm.
base level that should be
Mm.
being put in place. So we shouldn't be expecting philanthropists in any way, shape, or form to be funding the basics of what should be happening from a societal level. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And in that regard, do you feel hopeful about the future
I
in
think you
terms of
have
in the
to.
context?
I think you have to, despite everything that's going on. And of course, there are times times of the day where I don't.
Mm.
But I think there's a huge piece around everybody not undervaluing the power of collectively shifting and changing things. We
Mhm.
know, society knows, that this is sounding really grand, we know that things can change by the multiplier effect of people doing stuff.
Mm.
So I don't lose hope in the fact that people can do that. And in
Mm.
fact, the guy, the chap, Felix Dennis, who set up our charity, has left
Mm.
the most phenomenal legacy. He left
Right.
money, land, properties, and in a way whereby the security of that legacy is around, as we know, for 100+ years by
Mm,
planting a forest. It doesn't take much, and you don't have to be super wealthy to do that.
mm,
But I have faith in the fact that people can do it if they decide to do it and commit to doing it.
Great, thank you. Obviously, philanthropy comes in many different forms from different sources, and one of those could be a corporate partner or a major donor. So, for a corporate partner or a major donor that's listening, what does good support look like from your perspective?
Long-term partnering, not
Mm,
transactional. Again, I remember one of the charities I was at, the way that corporate support was seen was as money. It was
mm,
seen as money, and
mm,
spending quite a lot of time discussing, well, that's great, and you might win in year one, but
mm,
then what? You've got to, and also it doesn't make sense from a model because you've got to work twice as hard, 3 times as hard to repeat that every year. But the partnership approach, partnership is a word that's massively overused, but it's so fundamentally important for the corporate sector in particular.
mm,
So it's far more important to have fewer,
mm,
bigger, better, longer partnerships with corporates in the charity world than it is to have lots of
mm,
1 year donations and gifts, because that's not
mm,
sustainable and it doesn't
mm,
deliver value to the corporate
mm,
partner.
mm,
So for me, that's it. It's long term. It is two-way,
mm,
and almost seeing it as a proper partnership, like you would with a supply chain or
mm,
provider or whatever it might be.
mm,
Um, and also then the similar principles kind of apply if you are making a gift or signing up as a regular giver. So I'm a regular giver to a couple of charities, one in particular where I continue to give, and I
mm,
continue to give unquestioningly
mm,
because they make me feel part of it. They
mm,
connect with
mm,
me. It doesn't need to be a lot, and I
mm,
don't get anything tangible or physical
mm,
for it, but
mm,
they tell me enough that makes me go, worth every penny. And they make me feel like I'm part of it.
mm. That's great. You're talking about partnerships. Have there been any particular partnerships or collaborations that you're able to talk about that have sort of shown you what's possible when organizations really do come together and commit to that long-term sustainable support? It might be difficult
Yeah.
to answer.
Well, the one that's just popped into my mind. So this was when I was at the Soil Association. So this was my role there was working with local authority. It was basically a school food program. So teaching children how to cook, where their food came from, how to grow food, and then the quality of the school food on the plate. And the program had been commissioned by Hull City Council, so to do
Okay.
work with the schools in Hull.
Mhm.
It'd been a really successful program, absolutely amazing, absolutely brilliant, and classic same old public funds being cut, and a major company, food production company based in the heart of Hull.
Mm,
We managed to get them engaged.
mm,
They stepped in and managed to secure the future of that program for,
mhm,
it would have been into the tens of thousands of children every year in Hull, and protected that program for improving school food education and the quality of the school food on the plate.
mm,
That
mm,
stuck for years and years and years. And they were able to partner with the local authority and underpin where the local authority funding was being cut, and with the catering providers in the city. And it was just one of those fabulous things that my job was to get it up and running and to get it in
mm,
place, and then step aside and leave it, because
mm,
everyone then realized the value and the power of what it was doing. So
mm.
yeah, there are loads of examples of that. But again, it was about that company committing long term.
That sounds like a really rewarding process, and I think it's then I've had this conversation with other guests as well, as those moments where you realize that you can actually make a difference in your role working for a charity, that you can actually make change that changes people's lives if that's the intention, or
Yeah.
or removes the problem or lessens the impact of the problem in one way or another.
Yeah. Yeah.
But on the other side of that, sometimes the work we do can be quite heavy. It can feel heavy and it can take its toll on us. So on a personal level, how do you combat that, and how do you make sure protect yourself from that and make sure that you're recharged and that you can show up day after day and continue to do the work that you do?
I Oh, this is going to dig deep. I definitely have a game face a little bit at work. So, like I said earlier about how I like to compartmentalize things. So,
Mm,
when I'm at work, I'm at work, and when I'm not at work, I'm not at work. And
mm,
I'm quite guarded around that because that's what
mm,
I need to do. It's different for different people, but that's
mm,
how I need to be. So I
mm,
know that when I go to work, that my job is to be resilient and to manage a team and to support them, and also because I think, in particular with fundraising, but with any team that I manage, I feel like my job is to make sure that they're happy and that
mm,
and I mean happy at work as well, that
mm,
they come to work and enjoy the work that they do and that they want to be there.
mm,
And they're only going to get that if I'm happy,
mm,
if I'm also just kind of up for it every
mm,
day. But the way I manage that is I am quite boundaried with things and I'm quite open about those boundaries with people. So we've laughed and joked. So in my early days of arriving at Heart of England, we all talked about, so how do you work and what do you like? And I said, well, you'll see me messaging and emailing at like 6, 7 in the morning.
mm,
Ignore me, just pretend
mm.
I'm not there. Because by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you won't get much quality out of me at all. I can barely speak by 5 p.m. because I've
Yeah.
switched off by then. I've done my stuff, and we kind of lay those boundaries.
Mm.
And then personally, I have two hobbies, which are running and acting.
Okay.
So I run and I act, and they're compartmentalized as well. But those are
Mm,
the things, and I'm quite selfish about them. I will very, very bluntly defend both of those
mm.
because they're my time that I know that I need in order to turn up happy on a Monday morning.
And were
I'm
there any
sure I
mentor?
don't always turn up happy on a Monday morning, of course, but
Neither do I, particularly not on Mondays. Were there any mentors or people that kind of gave you that ability to compartmentalize and create those boundaries, or is that just something you've developed over time?
I think I think the compartmentalizing is something I developed over time. I do
Mm,
remember having a conversation with one chief exec, and
mm,
I've never forgotten. It was very funny. And they said to me, uh, I just stepped up into a national role, I think, and I'd just taken on doing a production at the Oxford Playhouse, and I was one of the lead roles in it. And I was kind of just sharing in the margins, like, "Oh yeah, I'm doing a lead role at the Oxford Playhouse. I'm about to start rehearsals." And the chief exec, very, very, very good, said, "Oh, is that a good idea?" And I said, "I don't." So I was just revealing some of my personal life. I went, "I don't have any children, so I never in my career have I stepped away to do the school run, or to
mm,
do the sick leave, or to
mm,
do anything." And I kind of felt I had to defend myself and go,
mm,
"My children is going to a rehearsal.
mm,
So when it's 5 o'clock and I've got to be on stage, you've got to treat that as my school run, my
mm,
sick call, whatever else it might be, my fag
mm,
breaks that I've never
mm.
had, all this sort of thing." And as soon as I said it, my brilliant, brilliant, brilliant boss just went, "You're so right." And that was it. It was about that. So I
Mm.
think I've just always been boundaried, but
So
I've never
true, and
forgotten
so
that
important.
conversation.
I think
Yeah,
people just don't realize that or don't think about that, and they should do. And you should possibly make more of that, because I think it's so true that people put more value on certain aspects of people's lives than they do on others.
that's right.
And yeah,
And interestingly, working at Mind, one of the things that was
mm,
really, really fascinating and shifted
mm,
my thought
mm,
around things there is, so at Mind,
mm,
the charity works with a lot of people who are neurodiverse. And
mm,
then you have to shift your understanding again,
mm,
where boundaries may not be the same for everybody.
mhm,
And how do you work in that space, in that world, where actually
mm,
people's understandings and
mm,
boundaries and processes and ways of
mm,
working and behaving are really,
mm,
really, really, really varied. And there's
mhm,
definitely not, and that's why I think I said for me, boundaries work, but for other people, that will not work at all.
mm,
There has to be, you have to find some level playing field where everyone
mm.
understands that what might work for you is not going to work for them and vice versa.
Great, thank you. This might seem a bit of a left field question, but how have you handled moments of sort of doubt or imposter syndrome in your leadership roles? Because I know from my own perspective, sometimes that next step can feel quite an intimidating step to take, and you're now in a a senior role and have been in previous roles as well, all the way through, in fact. So how have you kind of got into a state where you can cope with that, if you've had to cope with it at all?
Yes, I've had to cope with it. I've always said, uh, anyone. In fact, there was a leadership course I went on years ago,
Mm,
and they asked a question about imposter syndrome.
mm,
And I remember there was one person who didn't put their hand up, said they never had it. And afterwards,
mm.
there was this little chat of like, who is this person? Like, who doesn't have imposter syndrome at some point in their lives? But
Yeah.
how do I deal with it? So I think everyone, or the vast majority of people, have it.
Mm,
And how do I deal with it? I think by being really open and honest about it.
mm,
Goes back to, especially, I think one of the really important bits about being in a leadership role
mhm,
is completely acknowledging that you do not know everything about everything.
mm,
That's why you have a team of 20, 50, whatever people working, with you.
mm,
Is because you don't know. You're not an expert in that. And quite often I
mm,
will use the phrase with different people, direct reports or whoever team members will come to me and ask. And if I don't know, I will just kind of go, I don't know. That's what I employ you for. You go
mm,
away and you tell me and I'll back you, or I'll, do what I need to do
mm,
to support that.
mm,
But allow those moments of doubt to be there because they're real and they've come from a real place, but that
mm,
doesn't mean that you can't then still go ahead and do it. If we wouldn't, I was going to go down the route of sounding like a quote book there, but there's probably some quote by somebody that says, you don't achieve anything by not trying something that you're not
yes.
sure of. There you go. You can have that quote that I've just met.
Thank you for that. Looking ahead into the future, obviously you're working for this great organization now, and it sounds like you've landed exactly where you want to be and need to be at this time. Things could
Mm.
change, who knows, but it sounds like you're in the right place. So, what's right at the top in terms of your priorities for Heart of the England Forest? So, in the short term, maybe over the next 12 months, what sort of things do you really want to get done for the organization?
Mm. So, like I said, the charity's still really relatively young,
Mm,
and has got a huge mission, but a very, very clear mission ahead of it. And my
mm,
directorate has been brought together for the first time
mm,
as a whole cohesive group, and it really does focus on the engagement and fundraising piece together. So that
mm,
whole human public interface piece.
mm,
So one of my really early pieces of work is what does that look like and how do we talk about that? So how do I bring that whole directorate together where we know exactly who we are and what we're saying to who,
mm,
because that can be quite one of the charity's biggest Achilles heels. And I don't mean this charity, I mean
mm,
every charity's Achilles heels
mm,
is we try to say everything to everybody. And
mm,
actually then kind of nothing lands or nothing lands
mm,
brilliantly. So I'm trying to work through some of that at the moment on, okay, where are we? Who are we out of the thousands of charities? What have we got to say or
mm,
do that's really exciting that will really engage people differently and
mm,
persuade them to join us in whatever way, shape or form? So that's one of the immediate pieces. We're in a really good position as a charity, which again is a really exciting place for me to be because that's not always been
mm.
the case. I've been in charities where you've been fighting day in, day
Very
out.
often the
We're
case.
not
Mm,
fighting day in, day out, which is a really great place to be. So we've got some really exciting opportunities ahead. So I was talking earlier about the heritage. So the sculpture collections that we've got and the artwork that we've got. I've literally kind of got a bit of a blank canvas. Our location is right on the edge of Stratford-on-Avon. So we've got the
mm,
RSC on our doorstep. We are planting what was the original Forest of Arden, which obviously has got huge Shakespearean
mm,
links to it. So and we don't know what that is. I'm being really open. We don't know what we're going to do with all of that yet.
mm,
So there's some really exciting stuff for me to get my teeth into about what
mm,
do we want to do and to be creative with that. So there's some
mm,
really exciting prospects. And then also there is the bit around the front end of what we're literally doing around planting trees, restoring nature and creating new habitats. We have got so many stories to tell about nature and biodiversity. We need to start to whittle it down and tell the ones that are really going to land or be really exciting. So we're trying to
mm,
understand that scientific data that underpins all of that. What are the really important species we want to talk about, or what are the really exciting habitats that other people aren't doing? And
mm,
pulling that data out. So there's quite a lot of fact-finding research and putting things in place at the moment because of the nature of where this charity is at. But that
mm.
for me is quite exciting because I've not really been in that stage of an early charity before.
I mean, I've had a big smile on my face pretty much all the way through this conversation, but in particular that bit, because it sounds really exciting, like, so many different areas. And it's
Yeah,
all like, as you said, at that sort of early stage.
yeah.
Do you have Is it possible to have a clear idea when you're looking at a project that it spans possibly centuries to understand what success would actually look like in that regard? What in your mind does success look like for Heart of England Forest?
Yeah, really good question. Notwithstanding the fact that the forest has got to be resilient over the next 100, 200 years. But for the bits that I'm in control of, let's say, we really do want and need to grow our supporter base. And that is not just financial. We are a new and young charity. So in some senses, it shouldn't be difficult because very few people know about us relatively at the moment. But also then that whole knowledge, awareness, PR, raising piece. So currently we're known very, very locally, but not a great deal further than that in the sector because we're new, because we're finding our feet. So for me, I would love people to know the name, know what we do, understand the impacts of what it is we're doing, and be partnering, not for us to be doing it on our own, but to have some of those phenomenal partners, whether it's financial, whether it's delivery, grant funding, where people want to be part of what we're doing. And because it's so tangible, because it feels like it galvanizes people, that's where I would like us to get. But it feels like we've got lots of opportunities to enable us to do that in this charity, which is genuinely very exciting.
Thank you. We're slowly edging towards the end of this episode, but if you could change one thing tomorrow about how we value nature or creativity, what would it be?
Oh gosh. I think I think that has to relate to access, because my brain's going back to equality with nature, and people will only engage with or value what they've got an experience of. And therefore, that access to experience nature has to be better. So whether that is part of it being part of the national curriculum, so that every child gets to experience it or visit it, whether it is built into the infrastructure of our places that we live. So I know there's a lot of work going on around that. Just needs to get a lot better. It needs to be in the infrastructure of things, and it probably needs to be built into the national curriculum.
For listeners inspired by this, what's the most helpful way to support your work right now?
Easiest thing, follow. The classic, follow us, connect, sign up. Yeah, signing up to news is great. It's brilliant. And of course, we want people to do that because that's a way of us being able to tell people more stuff. But even just following on social media channels is the easiest way. And I'd love people to do that because we've got so much exciting stuff that is already happening and is in the offing. So we would just love people to connect, follow us, talk to us, share stuff with us as well, because we've got this fantastic platform for all kinds of different interactions around nature, environment, and the arts and creativity. So people can have those conversations and create their own interactions through that. So that would be my first go-to.
And where would they need to go to follow you? Is there a website, or if they follow you directly, or they go to LinkedIn?
They can follow me directly, but I wouldn't advise it. Probably get all sorts of random gibberish stuff coming out. But the heartofenglandforest.org is our website. But obviously, if you do follow me in any way, shape or form, or the forest, you'll then find all the usual handles through on LinkedIn and Instagram. All the usuals.
And Oxford People's Theatre the same. There's a website, and they can...
Oxford People's Theatre we have a website.org. We are less active on LinkedIn because we're so new, but we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. I mean, Oxford in particular. Anybody who is in or around Oxford, search us out, and that's where you probably are more likely to find me. Although I'm not on many social channels, I'm on LinkedIn, but not a lot more. But yeah, please connect with Oxford People's Theatre in any way, shape or form, because they're amazing.
Right. Thank you. And looking back, sort of final question, looking back over your journey, for want of a better word, what are you most grateful for?
I think it probably goes back to my parents connecting me with how I grew up. I know that how I grew up just fundamentally shaped my love, comfort, respect for nature and the outdoors. It was just literally second nature to me.
Great. Thank you. What a great way to finish. Ian, thanks so much for giving me your time today and for sharing your story with such openness. I think what stands out for me is how you've woven together place, story, and purpose, whether that's protecting nature and the environment for generations to come, or someone finding their voice on an Oxford stage for the first time. So you're creating spaces where people encounter something bigger than themselves, and that's really powerful work. I feel quite emotional saying that. So for those listening, if Ian's stories resonate with you, whether it's The Forest, Oxford People's Theatre, or simply the idea of building something enduring, do go and explore their work. See how you might get involved, support, or simply visit. As always, if you are a charity leader who would like to explore your own why on a future episode, do drop me a line at earlybirdphilanthropy.com. I'd love to hear from you. And if this episode has resonated with you, and it certainly resonated with me, please like, share, follow and subscribe with someone who might be interested in learning more about these important topics within our sector. Next time on Night Owl Philanthropy, I'm speaking with Steve Phillip, who's founder of the Jordan Legacy CIC, a charity dedicated to preventing preventable suicides. So Steve's journey starts with the heartbreaking loss of his son, Jordan, and the painful question of what might have been different with earlier support. From that grief, he's built a mission to break the silence around suicide, to normalise conversations and push for practical interventions. It's a raw, hopeful conversation about grief, leadership and second chances, and one I think many people will find deeply moving. Until then, take care, and once again, thank you so much, Ian.